Hey everybody. So today we're going to look at two things. The first one is skin retouching, and we're going to explore color correcting in log. I hardly ever use the log nodes ever, but in that last tutorial, I Googled a lot of stuff and I tried it out. And much to my surprise, I felt the log nodes, once I understood that, gave me a lot more control and looked a lot better. So I'm going to try to color correct more stuff in log because I feel it gave me a finer amount of control. So let's take a look at this shot here. This woman lost her sister to heroin, and we did a story about it. I don't know where you're watching this, but I live in New England, and there is a horrible heroin epidemic here. I came from Philadelphia to Boston, and I could not believe how many people are addicted to heroin in New England. For the love of God, people, don't do heroin. This woman's poor sister didn't die of a heroin overdose. She actually died of a bacteria that was in one of the needles that she was shooting up her heroin with, and she died a horrible death. And we interviewed her about it. So this woman was obviously distraught. She was very upset during the interview. And it's my job as the colorist here to make her look as good as possible. And I really want to do a good job on this story because I really felt bad for this poor woman. No one deserves to lose a sister like how she lost her sister. Anyway, so this was shot by a photographer named Jason. He's an excellent photographer and an excellent producer. And this is what he shot. So I'm looking at the scopes here. It's probably pretty hot. I want this to be dark and mysterious isn't the right word, but I want to make this shot a little darker, a little more dramatic, a little more impactful than this lighting here. So I'm looking at the scopes. The blacks could probably come down a bit. And the midtones and the highlights could come down. So in the first node, this is a log node. This little circle means log. In the first node, I'll turn that on. That's what I did. I brought down the blacks. You can see a lot of the blacks were crushed. That's fine. Up here is crushed. Over here is crushed. I brought down the mids and I brought down the highlights. Now again, we're in log. So when I move the midtones, see just the midtones are moving. I found that this gives me a lot finer control over exposure than a primary node would, but you have to be careful because if you bring it down too much, you can start getting weird artifacts like this and this. So when you do use log, just keep an eye out for that. It's just how the corrector works. I also put some red in the midtones. I felt her skin was a little washed out. I'm going to put this on 2 times here so we can see it better. That's what was shot. That's the first node corrector. I put some red back in the midtones, and I also put a little bit of blue into the blacks. I felt that some of the blacks, like here and here, were a little too red. So the first node's usually an exposure node. Nothing's clipped in the whites. I crushed the blacks. This is crushed, and this is crushed, but that's okay. I want you looking at her, not the background. So when I did my tutorial about log, I used the offset control, which is something I never ever do in primary mode, because I always would adjust my colors in the lift, gamma, and gain. And as I discussed in the previous video, when you move lift, gamma, and gain, it kind of affects the whole picture. But when you're in log mode and you move, let's say, the shadows, only the color in the shadows moves. Look at the scope, all right? Just the dark part moves. In a primary mode, if you move the shadows, everything would kind of move. So your shadows, the color would move a lot. The midtones would move a little bit. Even in the highlights, it would move a little bit. But the way log works is, if you move your shadows, the color is just going to move in the shadows. Look at the waveform. It's not moving. So what I discovered was I can move the offset. And when I move the offset, the color for the entire picture moves, which is kind of nice. But it's super helpful when you're in log mode and you want to do an overall picture adjustment. Again, this is one of the ways log differs from primary. So I put a little bit more red into that picture. So in the second node, I brought my shadows down. I raised my midtones up a little bit. I brought my highlights down. I felt that I was losing some detail in her shirt. And her shirt was kind of red. I felt it was picking up probably some reflections from that red wall. You can see here, this is her shirt. It's not quite white. I put some blue and cyans into the whites of this picture to make her white shirt a little bit whiter. And I looked at it again, and I decided that I wanted to cool the picture off a little bit. It was a little too red. So I started here, and you can see the blob. It's kind of pushing up towards the red, and I put a little bit of blue in the offset and dragged it right down to there. So this node just affects the wall, and I'll get to that at the very, very end. So this node right here is where I started to affect her skin. So this is what her skin originally looked like. To me, her skin's looking a little too yellow. So I qualified it first. Then I drew a shape around it. I don't think I tracked it because she's not really moving. Let's see. Yep, no need to track it. So I went in and I did a hue versus hue. Now this is a very special case. For whatever reason, I couldn't get the yellow out and give her a normal flesh tone. Every time I took the yellow out, it went to pink. So let's look at this. I'm going to reset my hue versus hue. That's what it looked like. That's what was shot. So her face is very yellow. Her chest is a little pink here. I'm going to undo that. I was able with hue versus hue to kind of get it all in one nice, neat line, but it's too pink. It's pushing to the red. And normally what I would do is once I got it all kind of one color, even though it was pink, I would just come in and adjust my hue. So if I go into node 4 here and I spin that hue around, look what happens to the scopes. It's kind of breaking up and widening out and turning her very green. In node 5, taking the matte from this key here that I already pulled into this node, and I spin the hue around, it's moving as like one piece. I don't know why it's doing that. I've never had that happen before, but I'll take it. Now, I could have requalified her here again, but why bother? I already pulled the key here. That's why I had that matte pipe into here. Sometimes you got to flip it in the key mode here, because this way would be affecting everything but her skin. And you know what? Sometimes that's handy too, but I just wanted to affect her skin. So now her skin is looking a little healthier. It's not as yellow. It's a bit more saturated. It's kind of one tone. It was kind of two-tone before. It was kind of yellowy up here, kind of pinky down here. So in node 5 here, we've cleaned up the color on her face. We've cleaned up the color on her chest. It's all kind of like one color now, but she's got this discoloration in her skin. And as a colorist, you're often asked to fix this kind of stuff. This is a tough story. It's an important story. Her poor sister died of a blood disease that she got by injecting herself with heroin. And I don't want anybody distracted about how this woman looks. I really want her story to be told. And this spot on her chest here, it's just kind of distracting. And it's going to take away from the very important message we're trying to convey with this story. So what I can do here is I can get rid of a lot of it. What I did was I qualified it. And again, make sure you blur this. We've talked about this before. When you do this kind of work, you really got to look at this and make sure you've keyed it properly and you're color correcting it properly. Because when this type of thing doesn't work, it really doesn't work. And I put a mask around it, so I've just qualified that splotch of her skin. And what I'm able to do is, that's what was photographed, and that's what I corrected it to. So what I've done is I've just keyed out that half of the blemish, and I did this in primary, not log, because I was a little too chicken to do it in log. It really wasn't working and not blending very nicely in blog, so I switched over to primaries. So all I did was, so this part of her skin was darker than this part of the skin. I brought the gain up some. I brought the gamma up a little bit, 0.01, not much. And I just took out a little bit of red from this picture. I pushed it ever so slightly towards green and blue. It didn't need much. I used a primary, not a log, because I don't think the log node has the midtone detail. So I came in and qualified her skin again, and that's what Jason photographed. And by turning down the midtone detail quite a bit, I was able to smooth out her skin a lot. A lot of this discoloration down here is gone in her skin. A lot of the discoloration in her face is now gone. You can see before, after. We've got some hot spots, some shiny spots on her face here. We still have some discoloration in her skin down here. But if you put your midtone detail, I put it to -66. A lot of that stuff goes away. A lot of those blemishes and skin imperfections and even shiny spots on lighting can go away. So that's before, after, before, after. It's a much more pleasing look to flesh tones and to skin. And I think it helped out this picture quite a bit. But let's take a look at her cheek here. She's got this kind of mark here. I don't know what it is. It's a dimple or something. Maybe it's bad lighting. Maybe it's a shadow from the light. I'm not sure. But again, it's kind of distracting. I don't want anything in this woman to take away from her message and what she's trying to tell people. So I tracked the shape to her, and what I did was I did a blur. In this node, you can blur. I'm going to put it on 0.65. That's where I had it. It's blurring on the X left and right and the Y axis up and down. Now with this slider, you can control how that blur happens. So if I slide it all the way down, it's just blurring it up and down. And you can still see that blemish. It's not working very well. These blemishes are vertical. They're up and down. So I'm going to blur this thing horizontally. I don't want the blur to just go up and down. That's really not helping me. But if I can just have the blur go left and right, it's going to blur out these vertical stripes. So if you have a vertical stripe, you do a horizontal blur. And if you have a horizontal stripe, you do a vertical blur. So let me bring that all the way up. And now that's gotten rid of those blemishes. And finally, our old friend, a shape outline. I've outlined our subject here, and I've simply darkened out what's behind our subject, like this, so your eye is more drawn to this woman. Now, there's one last node, which is way up here. So when I gave these shots to our graphic artist, I gave them uncolor corrected. And our graphic artist took this color up in here and matched it to the spot right there. See that kind of maroony orange red? Looks a lot like this. But after I color corrected it and got the graphics back from the graphic artist, that's what I color corrected it to. And the graphic artist gave me the graphics, and this color no longer really matched this color. So fortunately, we're in a color correcting software package. And way back here, I did this node last. See, it's node 13. I didn't put this node after this node like this because I would have to deal with all this lighting that I put in this node. So I went all the way back to the tippity top here, and I pulled a key right there. I did this as a primary node because it was a very quick and dirty thing at the end, and I wasn't quite confident enough to do it in a log node. So I just keyed out that red, came in here and spun my hue knob a little bit. You can see on the scopes, all I did was swing that hue a little bit to the yellow to make that color match the color our graphic artist had pulled. See that? That didn't match so well. It was very red. If I turn it on, it's more orangey, more yellowy, and the red in the background wall matches the red that our artist made for the graphic. So I hope that helped you guys. It helped me. I'd never really done much in log, and I noticed I had a lot more finer control. So we did an awful lot in this tutorial. I'm beginning to see the power of using a log node. So that was part of it. And the second part of it was retouching skin. Very, very important as a colorist. You do a lot of work retouching people's skin, and some of the tips and techniques I've showed you can really help out. What I did in this tutorial to accent this woman's skin and make her skin look better are pretty common techniques. So I'm on an older version of DaVinci here, and there's many boring technical reasons for that. But I just saw the press release for DaVinci version 15. They bundled in Fusion with it. You can do way more powerful stuff now with Fusion to fix up people's skins, and you'll be able to do a lot of little visually effective work. I hope this helped you guys out. There's a lot of good basic foundation techniques in here that you can use in DaVinci or any other software platform that you're using. I'll show the promo at the end like I always do, and happy correcting, everybody.
She lost her younger sister to opioids.
She said, I'm gonna die. I know I'm gonna die.
But it wasn't an overdose.
Her hair was falling out. She'd start crying.
It was something that could have been treated in time.
On any given day, we have half a dozen young people who are suffering from this.
We expose this hidden illness tonight on Boston 25 News at 10.